going live. Making sure that we're recording.
Mm-hmm.
All right. All right, did you get it figured out, man?
I think
you froze a little bit.
All right, I'm back. I popped the link out, I think. So if it went into a chat, so if people come, that's where they came from. If not, it's okay.
Okay.
I can see there's a private chat and then there's a comment section here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So the private chat is between us and the comment section is them. So if you need to bow out early or something and someone's still speaking, you're able to do that, or you can say no. Oh, what happened to Jason? He bowed out again?
Yeah, he's probably adjusting his camera.
Oh, okay.
I clicked the wrong button. Button.
I done that earlier.
I'm like, okay, Jason's here now. He's not gonna try and cancel out of chats. I'm here.
Yeah. All right. Well, Olo, welcome to Readdress Culture, and I appreciate you taking the time and coming here today. I know my entire team is very excited to have you here as well, and I just look forward to going into deeper topics with you, and especially getting to know who Olo is, what shaped Olo, and then where's Olo now. So that's where we're going to go with this topic, and then, dive into that spiritual world that we all have been in, digging deep within ourselves. So, Olo, I know that your family is from another country, and you yourself as well was born in another country too, correct? And want to tell us how the culture of what you grew up in shaped who you are, and as Jason said earlier, what is programmed or what is adopted into you now?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here. I'm happy to have this conversation with you. So right on to the topic. Yes, I am originally from Nigeria. I've lived pretty much my entire adult life here. So I'd like to say I've spent half of my first half of my life in Nigeria and the second half here. So pertaining to how that has shaped my views, I want to say first off that I think growing up in Nigeria, I did stick out like a sore thumb, I want to say. So, and I think most people in different parts of the world, you'll find people like that who, despite their culture and where they're from, don't necessarily always fit in to their culture. And so I think this is true with groups of people everywhere. And so this was the case with me. I do have strong roots in Nigeria in terms of friends and cultural norms and things like that. And so there are certain things and aspects of the way that I view life and things that I understand how life should be that are anchored in Nigeria and the cultural practices there. And so I'd say there's a dimension of how I see things that is anchored there. but there are other aspects that I've left open to and have received a wealth of impression from my experiences here physically, and also from exposure to media, books that I've read, people that I've interacted with, and also from my experiences as well. I hope this sort of answers the question, but you can also follow on if there's something in particular.
Yeah, so culturally, Nigeria is different than my people's culture. So can you tell me a little bit more about culturally, were they similar to what happens here in America, where it's European and or more of like the Abrahamic beliefs, or what culture wise? Because I would love to know where the hair split for you. Like, where did you step away from and say, there's more to this than what I'm seeing?
So for me, so Nigeria, when we speak of faiths, has a dichotomy in the sense that one half, or I'd say a third of the country, is depends on how you slice it. So there are three major cultural groups in Nigeria. There are many, but the larger ones are three. There's the Igbo, there's the Yoruba, and there is the Hausa, which are the North. The North is the largest in terms of land mass and political power, and they happen to be predominantly Islamic. And in the South, you have the Southwest and the Southeast, and these are predominantly the Igbo and the Yoruba, and they are predominantly of the Christian faith. I fall within these groups. For me, growing up, my dad is what you would call more or less a non-practicing, was what you would call a non-practicing Christian. So he grew up in an agricultural household where they were Christian, but he, while he was within the faith, had more questions than answers. And so at some point in his life, after he lost his mother, these questions came to the fore, and he was exposed to readings and writings. And it was from this point where he started some exploration, and this started my journey as well. And so from a very young age, I had exposure to works outside of the Christian faith. And so my journey started very early, even though I had exposure to Christianity and to Islam. My spectrum was wide open from a very young age. And so I want to say, I wouldn't say I'm well read. I'm obsessive with reading. But in terms of reading about other faiths and other cultures, I have a broad understanding, or I don't shelter myself from saying, oh, this is, I don't want to read this because it's demonic or something like that. So I have, where there's exposure and opportunity to learn and read about a certain faith or a certain group, I jump into it and I take that opportunity. Because there is truth, I believe. There is truth in every culture and every people. From my understanding, as the creator or the source is the source of all people, none would have been neglected. So all would have had a connection to him or to truth. And this truth, if it was retained, would be somewhere in some fragment or shape or form in some religion there. And so if it's preserved, you would find it there, or some fragment of it there. And so this is usually what you would find in religion, or traces of it in religion.
That's deep. That was deep. How did that like shape upbringing then, you know, with this fact that, you know, you said your dad started to, you know, was non-practicing and then began to kind of question, look, and then tying into you also, I have the similar, like that similar belief structure of there being some degree of truth in all things that would unite us if we looked for it. So how would you say that like influenced like you in your finding of yourself, if you will?
It's not a very simple question. There are many dimensions to it. There's the personal, like in looking out. As a child, there's the idea of wanting to fit into the world. So there's that aspect of feeling. There's a cultural aspect to religion where you're within a group. And there's that outcasting that happens when you're not within religion. So there was that aspect as well. But I already had this experience from just my general outlook on life. So it was difficult, but it was also something of a thirst or a seeking. And there are this is you'd have to put in other factors as well. The way my brain works, I had other challenges. And so there were many things I was dealing with in this difficulty. I had difficulties reading as a child as well. So there's this grappling with information and wanting to read and wanting to seek and finding ways to get information. And so it was a very interesting time in my life that will be very, it would take a very creative way to summarize it in brief sentences. I hope this sort of covers your question. If not, you can like rephrase it and I can find a proper response.
No, I think that's very good, because there's none of these questions are just very like, there's so many layers and there's so many influences that we have, especially in like the who we are. I kind of go to that Alan Watts version of, you ask somebody who they are and they hit you with the factory, response of, this is who I am. And it's like, okay, but that's cool. But like, who are you really, if you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
Well, I think it's fascinating, one, that your dad was open to exploring and not tied to one thing or another, because when we come from deep-rooted cultures, you're rooted in something very deeply from the beginning. And so in a way, like when we have those one rebel in our family, they're the ones that break the chains, right? They're the ones that say, maybe not all these roots should be rooted down into everything. All these rituals don't make sense either, and I'm very grateful for those that step beyond that, because then they open the door for so many in their family to say, we don't have to, as Jason told me one time, a story about cutting the lamb's leg to fit in the oven. We don't really have to cut up all this lamb to fit it in the oven, because in the beginning it was done because the oven was too small. And then just everyone kept doing it, trickling one after another. It worked for one, but we didn't understand why. So we just kept doing it. And that's kind of like how humans have walked, right? We walk with the knowledge that somebody else did it and was successful. And I remember that we had this conversation about the mark and the mark of the beast and what it could imply in different ways, and how we do imprint on each other so easily from the very beginning. And it is those that are brave enough to go against the grain that really light this world up. And then you just said, you struggled to read when you were younger, and you're a scientist. Like, that is like some overcoming stuff and some powerful stuff right there. Just on your spiritual journey, you overcame so much more. I mean, kids parents get kids, you know, it's a struggle to get kids to read at all, but for you to want it, know that it's a struggle, and then to come out on top and be a scientist on top of that, that's amazing. And I want to hear, since you are a scientist, and science and spirituality to me are saying the same thing. They're saying the same thing. The ancients just had it a little bit, I guess, the journey of the spirit was more, you know, attuned and not so influenced by science and not so influenced by the programming of so many people over centuries as science has. So I think that's what slowed science down, is the whole like too much influence. But you have found this balance of, yes, I am a scientist, but I also know that there's more to us than the molecules that make us up in the physical form. So I want to dive into that, and how do you not cross your own boundaries within the science field? Like that's kind of tough, right? Like depending, I guess.
Well, it is, it's tough. But for me, the conviction is there. Thank you for the praise. I don't think it's that praiseworthy. I think it's more a testament to being very stubborn on my part. It does come across a tenacity, and certain things does come across as, you know, praiseworthy in certain aspects. But as far as the science, for me, the conviction is crystal clear. And so I have no problems taking up anyone within the scientific community on any topic at all, because I have the clarity with what I know and what I understand and how I understand things to be. That's my conviction. Now, as far as how I've been able to balance that, I know the limitations of the scientific method and the current scientific understanding, and working and operating through that is basically just understanding that I have to work with one hand tied behind my back. And it is through avenues such as this, and at some point in my career, knowing that I can't fight from within the infrastructure and having to work from outside of it. It's interesting, the way that science works. It's almost like a cult. It basically is a cult. That's unfortunately how it is. A lot of times, when you have research and findings, the interpretations and things like that are laced with opinion. So I operate from logic. Then that's just the safest. That's actually the only way. And we'll get into this as the conversation continues. Logic is the only way. That's the basis for reality. That's the only way to establish things free from opinion, free from subjectivity, free from bias and things like that. It's just simple logic. It's very simple. It's very straightforward. It doesn't lend itself to differing opinions or anything like that. It's like saying 1 + 1 is 2. As simple as that is, it's as simple as that.
It's funny. I was gonna say, it's funny that you mentioned that. I was just reading that last night. It's like you were saying, logic, and how you're using the word logic to describe it would be similar to, I was reading last night, is a universal truth. It would be like 1 for 1, 1 + 1 for me is 2, and it is for everyone else. If you bring two things and you add them together, you now have 2. And so if it's true for me, in that sense, it would be true for everyone else as well. And so it's using that logic and that discernment to try and find those common blocks that interconnect.
Yeah, that's correct. You'll find a lot of smart people who try to say, well, logic isn't universal. 1 + 1 is 2 is not universal. You can find this. But when they do this, I think I talked about this at some point in the past, where, if someone comes and says, well, in this specific context or scenario, if you take this one thing, well, they've already invoked a different context. So it's already something else. And with the implication of a different context, you've changed the entire equation. And with the change in context, you've changed the logic. And so when we say 1 + 1 is 2, it really means 1 + 1 is 2. When you add an if statement, you've changed the logic. And that's how mathematics, or that's how logic works. It's really very simple in that sense. And if you think in simple terms, it's very difficult to get confused or lost. And so for me, when I admire a lot of great scientists, but a lot of times folks are biased by their own preconceptions, both within the atheistic community and also within the theistic community as well. Even though I fall within one of these communities, I find that a lot of times we paint our opinions professionally and scientifically with our preconceptions. And I can't really 100% say that I'm free from this bias myself, although I try to be, but no one's perfect.
I think to tie into what you were saying there too, it depends on the intention brought into the conversation or into the discussion. Because if the intention, like you were saying, the 1 + 1 = 2 thing, well, if somebody is coming in and they know that's what the discussion's going to be about, and their goal is to make 1 + 1 = something else, right? Well, you see, if you add these two things together, they technically go together, so it's still one thing. I think it depends on the intention behind. Is the intention to find common ground and to expand one's knowledge, or is the intention to come in and assert your knowledge and your understanding? And I think that's key to where a lot of common disagreements take place, is the intention behind the logic, or you know what I mean?
True. I have, and this when we talk about journeys, I have had conversations with people, and this one took the cake. This gentleman told me to my face this one hill he chose to die on was that there could be worlds or universes where logic didn't hold, where truth didn't hold. And when he said this, I said, okay, if this is the hill you've chosen this hill, there's really not much more I can say about this, because if you can process that and really say that there can exist a universe in which logic does not hold, in which truth does not hold, and this universe itself can be true, can exist, existence, which itself is a condition that is dependent on logic itself. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I was going to say a universe where logic doesn't exist would still exist within its own logical framework.
Yeah, because existence.
Well, I would like to add something in, but I don't want to cut you off, Olo, so please go ahead.
No, that thread was completed. Jason was just was stretching it, so it's completed. Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, let's delve into this word logic, because I have an issue with the word logic when it comes to the realm of spirituality. So when it comes to science, I could see it, because logic equals reason, and what is reason, right? It's a ratio, a consideration of ratio. I just etymologied it already, did all this while y'all were speaking about it further, because this one gets to me. Because to try to make logical sense would try to make a mathematical sense of something, give reason. And then Jason and it asked, when you come into a conversation, what is the intent? Is it to, can you say it again? To
Is the intention to either A, come to a greater understanding and coming together, or to assert one's perspective as accurate?
and see, the latter of those would be what logic is, to come along and assert what we think is true, what we find reasonable as a collective group. And that collective group could be very small or very large. But when we use logic, it should, in my perception only, and I'm not trying to say yours is wrong, I'm just saying in my world, logic is scientific, it's mathematical, it is something that can have cause effect proven right there. And not everything on the spiritual realm can or be understood. So it's, for me, it's illogical to
There's
be
a paradox there.
Yeah,
There's a paradox there.
You're there. You're there.
It's
You're
just
there.
like,
You're there. You're right there. You're right there. You're right there. These are the two things. There's the thing itself, and there's the perception of the thing. You almost said it. What we're saying is this: there's truth. What is, right?
yeah.
And then we are trying to perceive what is, right? So when we say logic, right? So I don't want you to couple logic with reason. Reason is, and what you're saying is correct in the sense that reason is limited. We are limited. So when we're saying logic, we are using a limited means to try to perceive or understand logic. But logic itself is pointing to what is. What is unlimited. Truth is unlimited. So you are also correct in that regard. So the two things are actually correct. So that's the way you can juxtapose them. We are, through our limitation, trying to perceive what is unlimited.
But isn't that the same definition of insanity? When we're trying to chase something that we are limited to get to, like in this form that we're in. Not saying that outside of this form we're not, but in this form, we are stressing ourselves out, trying to make sense of things that should just be left. And then other things we're not doing, which is within.
Look at it this way. Imagine that we are in a forest, right? And we three are in a forest. Truth would be north, right? And we three have compasses that have somehow gone haywire, right? And truth would be true north. And what we are trying to determine is where north is. And that direction is what logic is trying to show us. Right? Even though we can't get to north, we are trying to find our bearing as to which direction is generally guiding us towards true north. So even though we can't perceive it fully, we can orient ourselves and say, this is a general idea or a sense of truth, versus if we were going like south. Or
I was gonna say, not to take from you, Olo, but so with that idea of us being on a compass, right, and us trying to find north, like true north, on a 360-degree circle, right, on one plane, there are 359 wrong directions, and so we go, okay, I'm not north, but I'm in the right. I know I'm closer than I was the other way.
Yeah,
and
I think that's the idea. Is not like, I get what you're saying, and that's a correct question, in the sense that it's crazy to try to grasp truth, but to have a general sense of which direction is the right direction, and have a clearer picture than one we had before and one we have now. It's like progress.
Well, I mean, I would have to, I guess, beg a differ in some way. Not to be a problematic issue on it, or make it something more, but what if, to take it to here, What if we're all looking for north and we are north? What if we are the north?
I think you're right on that though.
Forest, yeah, we're all in the forest, right? But we are the direction that we seek. So what north for me is not going to be north for you, right? Just like what is cold to me is warm to you still. So again, I find that we're all, because if we went that way, and in the way that we're saying it is the epitome of every religion and why they're so massively large, because one person said this is north, this is logical, this is reasonable, and someone agreed, and then many others agreed, but then everybody's heading in one direction and only one person was supposed to head there. And that's where I get the problem. Like, one person leads and then a mass amount of people follow, and it's just like, you're supposed to be your own north. Why are you
Well,
to make
here's the thing,
his stuff?
Right? So if we're all dropped off in a forest, are we all in the exact same geographical location in the forest?
Yeah.
Because
yeah, and I agree. I want to agree with you, Running Deer. That would be correct. Where it's like someone coming with a blueprint and dropping it off and saying everyone in this forest needs to take the exact same steps, independent of whether you have legs or wherever it is you're in the forest. You need to do this exact thing, no matter what the temperature is, no matter where you are, no matter what it is.
This many paces, even though your strides are different.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's absolutely, and you're spot on. I don't think I have a rebuttal for that. That would be, and you're right. You would be, and you're right in the sense that you are your compass. You are the compass, right? You have to orient. That compass will tell you which orientation that is, right? But it has to be set correctly. It has to, so it can't be, so you are right with the caveat that it has some,
it can't be, it's broken when you follow other people's path. It's no longer set to your compass. You're setting it to other people's path.
It can be broken if you don't exercise it correctly and you allow it to be, misdirected by other people. And there are 1,001 ways for it to be disoriented and things like that. And I think there's quite a I like that you pointed that out and tied that to the idea of mass religion. I don't know that I've heard that used with the compass idea before. I think that's interesting.
It is. I mean, and so the thing too, right, is like you were saying, if we're each our own compass and we're trying to correct it towards true north, right? And now we start walking and there's an obstacle and we have to sidestep a little, right? Our new orientation, our compass it was north, but now this occurrence happened and I've taken some missteps. I'm a little disoriented now and I have to retry and calibrate. Where's north now from where it was for me? It's those minor adjustments, but we can only make those as individuals. Given where we're walking and the terrain and our personal like avatar loadout, right?
And that's correct. And a person who has maintained the right sense of balance will automatically adjust to that and reorient the compass and know where true north lies. No matter what anyone comes and says, oh, you should do this, you should do that. No matter what is thrown at them, they can reorient themselves and find out where true north lies.
Well, I think that comes from being able to, like everyone knows, I'm lenient on silence. And after this meeting today, I'm going into it for my annual, like I do this annually, Winter's Journey. And I'm so excited for it because every time I get into silence and I can still the world, I hear me again, and I get so excited to see the artwork that comes out, the writing that comes out. Like I already have it, and like, are there any things that you do that help you recalibrate your compass? Like, what do you do to stay on your path?
For me, I still have young kids, and so I I don't have that much of free time to recalibrate that yet. But in terms of things that I like to do, I like to read. I like to listen to books. I also like to write, but I write personally for myself. Um, I'm not at a point where I have started writing things that I intend to share with the world yet. And this is personal because I feel that there is too much writing in the world. And that's for many reasons. Whenever I try to find something on a subject, I'll take from the scientific community. Whenever I'm doing some research, I have to sift through so many papers on a topic, and that's because everyone is publishing something on the same subject, whether you're an expert or not, whether you're a beginner or not. And so, from at least from the scientific perspective, I feel people should just publish less. And so, from that perspective, I'm just exhausted with the idea of writing. Um, for me, it's more of just writing and reading. These are the things that I do, but for the most part, it's the younger ones that take up my free time, if there's any such thing as free time. So during these times of the year, one thing I do is the 10 Commandments. You probably see me on live sometimes. I've started doing this thing on TikTok where while I'm working on something, either reading something or doing some work, I usually have it playing in the background, and so I'll just turn it on and I'll go on live, and whoever wants to come in and sit and listen. So it's a book it's an audio book, and it goes through the 10 Commandments and gives a different take on each of the commandments. And it's a much more robust interpretation of the commandments that's different from how people interpret them. And the way I try to describe it is that, you know, how if you have children, if you've experienced with children, when you give them rules, they usually try to interpret the rules in the narrowest possible way that absolves them of the maximum number of offenses. So if it could mean 50 things, they interpreted it to mean like 2 things, so they can get away with 48 of those things. And they say, oh, I only thought it meant these 2 things, so these 48 other things I can get away with. And that's, for the most part, how the 10 Commandments are interpreted. And I take the 10 Commandments not as the way that we take human laws. I take each one as, look, this is the type of creatures that we are. We are creatures that are desiring by nature. We desire things. The ability to desire is not by choice. So we don't have a choice in desiring. We do have a choice in what we desire, but we don't have a choice but to desire. So we can choose what to desire. We can't choose not to desire. So that desiring, it's in what we desire. It can either cause harm to ourselves or it can cause harm to others. My take on the 10 Commandments is they are a general guide. If you avoid doing these things, then you will live in such a way that all that you desire will never bring harm to yourself or to other people who, just like you, can't help but also to desire. So keep your desiring in such a way that it remains outside of this scope of these things, right? And that's basically what they are. But most people take them to mean just punitive type of controlling things. But it explains them in that way. It first of all gives an introduction to them, and it explains how and why, what happens when this particular thing is done, and the effects on the immediate effects on the person and whoever it is done to, and the larger effects on society, basically.
See, I like that a lot. So like and I think maybe I've said this to you before, but like the term personal sovereignty, or that construct of a way of operation that, while you still pursuing your own wants and desires, leaves limited impact on anybody else's ability to do the same.
That is the law. That's what I understand to be the new law. You are allowed to wander through all of the creations, but you may do so in such a way that you don't cause harm to other creatures who, just like you, are going about pursuing their own desires. So
That's beautiful.
Yeah, that's the law of one, the first law, and the only law that really I heard that you have to abide by when doing desires. Before the Hermetics, I heard of this law of one. And then the Hermetics came in and gave their breakdown of even more laws, which we call like law of attraction, the law of cause and effect, all of that.
Yeah.
I wanted to touch base with you because desire is a choice. I'm going to sit with this. You cannot choose to desire, but you get to choose which you desire, which I think that's fascinating because I never looked at it like desire isn't a choice for us as humans. We must, because that's the animal side. Is that the animal side?
So
does
that's
that come from the animalistic side of who we are?
So no, that's actually the difference between the human. That's the difference between man and animal. That's what we observe and we call free will. So what we call will. So we as a creature are like a magnet. The spirit is like a magnet. It has the ability to attract or be attracted by anything that exists in creation. So if you imagine it in creation, without this free will, then it can attract everything in creation to itself. To prevent this from happening, right? It's given free will, which means it can choose to compose itself in such a way that it can attract one thing, right? So it can choose so it's like a tunable magnet. So it adjusts itself so that it can attract that one thing, whatever it chooses, right? So that's what this free will is. So without it, it will just attract everything that exists, right? So that's really what free will is. It's because we can't but attract. That's our nature. It's that magnetism. And that's what will is. Will is desiring, is attracting. You are desiring something. You are wanting something.
Well, okay, I'm going to ask this then. Animals, you say that's what difference is between us and animals, but animals have the same desire to be the head of the pack, safe and secure, well fed, right? So all of our basic instincts is what animals have, right? And they have the desire to be the head of the pride or not, and they act upon the will and go against the head of the pride to see if they can beat the elder. So in a way, we're the same. They are just like us. And so desire and free will, they have the same, because the lion sometimes makes the choice not to attack, right? So that's their free will. So I don't know if that's really what separates us. Maybe the capacity in which we can grow in use our free will, and the fact that our brain is larger and can be used more, maybe that is the difference. But I think they have the same will and desire as we do, because they have the same, even kundalini.
Can I field that one?
Okay,
Okay,
yeah.
so my thoughts on that. So to go back to my joke I made on the TikTok, right, Olo? Beavers just are out there beavering, you know? Olo trademark. Is an animal truly in competition because he wants to be the head of the pack, or is it because he knows he's may be a better fit that he makes the challenge? Whereas I think many humans, we get caught around with thinking we know best when we're truly not acting in accordance with that.
Well, that's because we were all
That's
lost
what
in the forest following somebody else's compass, but we always knew best. And it brings me, I'm glad you said that, segue right back into what I wanted to say about the children. So you said the children decipher rules, right? So, and they pick at them until you get 2 out of 4, the 15, you got 48 to just go off, because children know we are limiting their compass. We are limiting them and their creations, because we are, for me, in my perception, that we're very animalistic when we're not using our common sense, which is our spirituality, and what I call directly tied to who we are on the higher sense of, better not to do that. You cuss yourself out after you get done. Children innately already have that so strong, but we as parents parent from the place of fear that we break our children's compasses for them.
Mm-hmm.
Then we stick them in the forest and say, find which compass you want to follow now, because yours is broken. So the rules, in a way, hinder our children, and we should be asking them questions. Well, what do you think is best? And et cetera, instead of setting a rule. Now, I know there are some rules that are there to prevent our children from harming themselves, like a fire, falling off a cliff. But was it Charles Darwin or was it Freud that said the survival of the fittest? So sometimes, and I don't really believe in the karmic cycle after here. Sometimes the cause and effect is supposed to happen here. And we constantly stop it for our own children. Again, I think we are like the pride would be, because all of us think somebody else has got it wrong, because we're all on this journey to figure out what was right for us, because we know someone got it wrong and broke our compass, and then we continue to try to live life off of a broken compass within the forest.
I think you tapped on it. Like, in a nutshell, it's to say, like, we have our child and we say, here's the limitation. And the child wants to go, well, where are the boundaries of this limitation? But but what about over here? I know you said not, but is this too far? And they want to test the confines that we've laid out.
Yeah, and I also want to point out that I wouldn't trust Darwin with my kids. That's just one hole I poke in there. But you did point out, to your credit, that the rules, remember, in this case, are for the protection of the children. So I think in that sense, you sort of pointed that out. But to the idea, so there's one thing, if we go back to the question you asked about the animal and the human, we do have, one thing we have in common is the physical body, right? So, and the difference between man and animal is not just the body. We share this body in common. And so if you want to And if we want to have this conversation today, at least on one layer, we have to understand that there will have to be commonalities because we share this body in common. Now, in the sphere of those commonalities would be the instincts that come from this body. So within that scope are some of the things that you talked about. This body has certain things that come with it. Attached to it are instincts, things like thirst, things like the temperaments that come with the body. The temperaments are things that come with the body, right? And so these are things that you will also find in the animals as well. The things that don't necessarily come with the body are the things that you will notice the subtle differences in the operations between humans, the human or man versus the animal. One example, I think, that will set the difference apart is in cases where the human being will act in direct opposition to instinct. Versus where the animal cannot do this. It is impossible for the animal to do this. Where you will have a monk sit and set himself on fire and not flinch. This is where the will takes full control of the body. There is no writhing in pain. All of the nerves are on fire. Scientifically speaking, he should be twisting and turning and burning in pain, but he sits still. This is will control. There is nothing in the textbooks that explains this outside of will, power. The animal cannot do this. This is will. This is pure will. And that's the one example I can give. This is how we can explain the difference between will and where the instinct comes in. So the reaction to the fire would be how the body will react. You want to run, even if the animal doesn't run or if the person doesn't run, there's the reaction, which is flinching or burning or things like that. But where you sit still in composure is will. And there's nothing else that can explain this reaction.
I definitely get that. I get that.
So these are the categories. That's the category of difference. And it's not, I want people to understand that when we talk about difference in creature, there's only one example of man on earth, and that's us. It doesn't mean that there's only one example of man in all of existence. And it doesn't mean that the animal that are represented on Earth are the only animals that exist. There exist animals in other planes, and there exist animals that are higher than the man that you see on Earth. So the idea that we look down on animals as lesser creatures is actually false. It's just a type of creature. So it's like, you can think of it as a yin yang. So there's man and there's animal. It is just the type that you see on Earth. Those are just representations of the two types that are on Earth. But in reality, there are more of them. And there exist animals on other planes that are higher than the man that you see on Earth. It's just the type. One has will, the other does not. It doesn't make one higher than the other. It's the two are necessary. One has will, the other does not. And we can talk about the difference between the necessity for these two types.
Well, I think there's so many layers to what you just said there. Like, thoughts that came to my head is will versus desire, right? Because you were saying, you know, we're born with desires to a degree, right? But then there's the will. The will can say, well, this is what I desire, but no, you know. So that's a whole conversation we could have there. And then the other thing too is will. When you say, you know, like our example of what a human is based on this pinpoint perception in time, based on our current understanding of what the human experience is. But then you take what the human experience is throughout documented and recorded time. And you go, is our will today the same will as it was 500 years ago? And where have those differed? Whereas, instinctually, I think in the animal kingdom, the evolution and all of those things, right? But like the instincts of animals are always been relatively, they're still instinctual. It's still the instinctual drive, whereas
even
the human collective of will,
even the instinctive drive has also even the instinctive drive, because the instincts come from the material body as well. So the instinct comes from the material body. So that too has changed. But when I use the word desire, when I use the word desire, I'm using it interchangeably with will.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, when I use the word desire, I'm using it interchangeably with will. It's to will is to want, to desire. This is this is how I use it. I hope it's
Okay.
not bringing.
No, that's good. No, that's good. It's great. I was actually talking to somebody else the other day, and well, you and I have talked about will before with Saul, which we'll talk. I think you and I we should have him on and talk too. But we were talking about will, and somebody said the other day, they were saying, well, does a thought preclude will?
Does a thought preclude will? No, because I don't agree with I think, therefore I am. Absolutely.
You am, therefore you will.
I think, therefore I am comes from an intellectual person, someone who believes that the only reason he is human is because he thinks. So therefore, if I don't think, I can just be. To be where I am still without thought, right? I don't have to think to be. I can be in silence, which means my mind is silent, and I can still be.
Mm-hmm. You are, yeah. I think the root, right? The root is that I am.
Yes.
And the fact that I am gives me the ability to think.
There's no qualifier for I am in that sense. So that thinking is something that I am doing. I am thinking, right? So and I'm using my brain to think, right? So my brain is what I'm using to think. So I need a brain to think, but I am not my brain. So if I discard my brain, then I am not thinking. It doesn't make me less of an I am.
It doesn't mean that you cease to exist.
Exactly, right?
Mm-hmm. I love that. And I think, was that you the other day, Olo, I was reading and it talked about being, right? Like being good versus good being, right? The key is being.
Being, yes.
It's the being. It's the beingness of things.
It sounds like something I would say. Play on words that I would say.
Write that down. That's your quote. Being good versus a good being. It's in the being. It's in that.
Just being, yeah. Being a good person. Being, just being good or being, yeah.
I'm gonna sit on this free will versus desire. I'm gonna sit on that because like that's gotta, I'm over here in my head just going back and forth, like depicting this and that and like
it's deep. And I think and this is a conversation I'd love to continue more, and we didn't get to that day, Olo, was will versus ego.
Will versus ego.
And I heard it had said the other day, right? Like if ego wants to have all the knowledge, and you take out your highlighter and you highlight every word in a book, what's the important part? You know what I'm saying?
My ADHD brain just kicked in. And it really did, because like I'm over here like, what makes us different than animals in my head? Because now I'm going to have to go through it all, Olo. I'm stuck on it. That's how ADHD works. Sometimes you just get stuck on something in a rabbit hole. And I'm stuck on it because it's just like animals have emotions. Animals have desires. Animals don't always act instinctively. They act emotionally.
In reaction, sometimes
Yeah.
it's reactive in most senses.
So we are no different than they are. And who are we to say what they conversate amongst each other? Because we don't understand what they're saying. But yet they're so intelligent that they can learn our language. We've taught gorillas how to learn sign language.
None of what we have stated here assigns a lack of agency to animals. I don't want you to take it as saying that animals do not have a soul or do not have agency.
Okay.
Or anything like that. They do have souls. Their inner core is different. Their species is different.
It's their compass.
So do humans always stay humans then?
Yes, that's correct.
So humans stay always human, and do you see life on a loop? Do you see yourself on a loop? Let's segue into
I was
that.
going to say, well, it would depend. I think it would depend on the theology that we want to use, right? Because is that you start off as an element, like a rock, right, and then you progress towards a. Do you know the theology I'm going with there? That you eventually graduate to human.
So I've heard this before, and I don't subscribe to that. What I do subscribe to is that our beginnings, we all start in a basic state of humanness, and this was at the beginning, at the early stages of development of man, and this is something we can talk about. These are what I would consider spirit seeds, and these are already conscious, what I would call conscious spiritual seeds. And the goal of these seeds is to develop towards self-consciousness, and this comes through experiencing, and experiencing can only happen through life on these planes, on Earth. And this experiencing is essentially exercising will through life, and living and exercising your will is how this development happens. And so when we talk about loop, I'm assuming the question is about reincarnation. And so yes, I do believe in reincarnation. But I believe that the core of what a person is what determines what is reincarnating. So the outer form is like a garment, it's like a cloth. And what determines the outer core is the inner core. And so if I were to go and dress up or undress, I would still have my form. And what I would wear outwardly is determined by my actual form. And so my actual form is spiritual. So the outer form, or what I would come as, would be a spiritual form, which is the human form. And so for the animal, what they would come as is the animal form, depending on the type of species of animal. So on Earth, the reincarnation trajectories would be, for humans, would be incarnating as humans. So depending on the threads of fate and all of the other laws acting on the person, would be incarnations on Earth as human. But it's not a one-for-one, you just keep coming back in a loop. The Earth is not the only plane of existence. We also have the beyond. So after a life on Earth, there is a longer or shorter stay in the beyond, and then as necessary, an incarnation on Earth or a continuation of the journey, returning back to a spiritual destination.
I think it kind of goes back to what we were saying just a little bit ago. Like it's the beingness, of the spirit that influences what it becomes, to a sense. Which is that? Does that track? If you got where I was going with that?
So a spirit, the goal of the spirits on earth is like like a seed. Like if you look at an apple or a mango or something like that, when it spits out the seed, the goal for the seed is to germinate and to grow into a fully mature orange tree or an apple tree. So
Mhm.
each seed has the potential, the possibility to become a fully mature, developed tree. Not all of them become that. If they are provided the right conditions, they can become that. And so for us, this earth provides the right conditions, and we can all become that 100%. And that's how I understand things to be. That the earth is like the soil in which we fall into, and provides us with the conditions so we can grow, mature, and develop strongly to become mature spiritual beings.
I like that. Like this is the space where the being can become.
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah. That's
It can
beautiful. I mean,
become
that's
what
beautiful.
though? Like, I mean,
Ah,
why would we want to come back? Become what though? Because why would we want to come back to here? I understand that you're saying
bro.
spirit seeds coming here to grow consciousness, but why would we continue to come here and filter through and nothing seems to be getting better? Yeah, we've got running water and toilets that flush, but humanity is tanked completely for a few comforts in life. So what are we doing in a whole? I don't want to
We're
get us down there.
experiencing. Well, I was gonna say I'd love to hear Olo's take, but for me, if this is one of the only planes where experience can be experienced, this would be the place to come to do it. Regardless.
I think it's important to note that this is not it's not even remotely close to as it should be. This is not this. I wish you had been present during the reading of the Ten Commandments. You would first of all cry, and once you were done crying, you would be angry, because you would see, you would really see how far gone we were as human beings and how we should live, how we should be living.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes it clear that if you were the creator as a human being, you would smite every human being from existence, because the amount of love and patience it would take to just allow us to continue to exist, you wouldn't have it. No human being would have it. I don't, as I am. And I can be open and honest with everyone about that. In knowing what I know about where we are and how things could possibly have been and what we have made things to be, I don't have that patience. I would tell you right now that left to me, I would have wiped everything off the face of the earth, just knowing what I know, right? And so the patience that it takes is inhuman. It's beyond human, right? So you are right in feeling that way. But the goal isn't to come back. The goal was a garden. It's like, just try to imagine your own offspring,
Mm-hmm.
your own babies, what you would have created for them when you put them in a nursery. That's all you would have to think of. That's what you should imagine, right? What's the place was.
I want to say something. I'm so glad you said this, because I was going to say last night during one of my meditation sessions, the thing that came to me so vividly and like very loudly was, you are everything your mother wanted because she couldn't have. and that's what we are. So I created my daughter is everything I wanted to be as a teenager, as a young girl that I was not. And I am everything my mother wanted to be and have that she was not. You get what I'm saying? So I was the rebel because my mom was, you know, in a situation. So I was the rebel that she could not be. So we imagine our children without ever realizing that they are exactly who we wish we were in our darkest times. That strength, that pillar, like I'm that pillar my mom couldn't be, right? And my daughter is everything. The top, she's 5'11, she's top model ready to go on the runway, and we're working on getting her there. That's everything I wanted to be. I was an inch and a half shorter than I should have been for the runway, etc. But that's what came to me. And for you to touch on children and how to look at our children like a nurse within the garden as in the nursery, that came to me last night, and it was so loud. That
I was
you
gonna
are
say,
everything your mother wanted to be that she couldn't be for herself. And
I
that's
think
what we
that's
do.
wild. That's wild. See, like I was having a conversation similar, and so it's interesting that like these two takes come together with a conversation I was having the other day, and it's like it's through this, whether you can call it a knowing or an unknowing, right?
Mhm.
Although, however you want to take that, right? Through knowing true self or unknowing all of the conditioning put on self, right? When we look at, you know, you say things like ancestral trauma, or these shadow works, if you will, these things that we do that we learn to heal in self. We're not just healing them for ourself per se. You know, it's like, um, if I can be better, do better, I can pass that on to my children. And since I am better and doing better than my parents had left me, I'm in fact doing it for them as well. There's a continuum where time flows both directions. In trying to do better now, um, we're doing better for past versions of self and future versions of self. What do you
Yeah.
think on that, Olo?
I'm not sure. I mean, I can see the logical flow for future versions. I mean, I suppose I could see the logical flow for past versions in a sense. So that it does make sense. Um, there's I was having a conversation earlier today, and there's an agricultural aspect to this that makes it even more sad. Um, uh, Not sad, but you know, when you take one grain of corn, when Christ said, you know, what a man sows, you know, that shall he reap. He was alluding to the laws of creation. And, you know, we forget that man is a creature and we are also part of nature. And we are also subject to the laws of nature. And so when we take a grain of corn and we plant it, right, it comes out, we get a full corn stalk. And with that, there are several ears. And from that, we get how many grains? Almost like 1,000 grains. From one grain, we get about 1,000. This is the law. So whatever a man sows, so from that one grain, he gets 1,000. So the laws are meant so that when a man sows goodness and kindness and blessings, it is meant to fill his life with goodness, blessings, and kindness in abundance, 1,000-fold. This is how the world is meant to be. This is how it was willed.
Mm-hmm.
But
I love that.
What happens when instead we choose to sow hatred, malice, greed, avarice, wickedness? The law is neutral. The mechanism in creation is neutral. The earth doesn't know whether you sow wheat whether you sow rye, whether you sow rice, it doesn't know what you put in. It just knows that you put something in, and it is going to germinate it, and that thing is going to blossom and bear fruit, and it will multiply. And now where you have sown something, it will blossom and bear fruit and multiply. And so this state of affairs is unfortunately also an effect of the laws. So where the world should have been like so pervaded with so much joy, our hearts should be bursting, right? Now it's like you look at the world and it's like it's filled with so much like it's so hard. It's New Year's, it's festivities, it's Christmas, and for me, you try to have some amount of celebration, for the children, if you have young ones, and for friends and family. But for the most part, for me, it's a quiet time of the year for contemplation and reflection, because there is so much going on in the world that it's almost inhuman to want to celebrate anything when you know how much suffering is going on everywhere.
Well, I think, like you're saying, right, just as like fall, right, everything begins to decay and go back to the earth, right? Like winter is that time of reflection to prepare for the spring, right? To right oneself, kind of like Running Deer's doing, to center yourself and to get ready for spring, when it'll be time to sow the future we want. Just like you said, I think what we forget is that a lot of what's going around us, it may not have been sown by us directly, but we're contributing the cumulative nature of us. We're all sowing and we're all planting seeds. And it's what are the seeds that we want to grow? Do we want separation? Do we want division? Or do we want unity, peace? Because we can plant those seeds equally. Like you said, the earth doesn't know what we're planting. It's up to us to really sit with self and figure out what are the seeds we want to see growing around us. I mean, immediately, that's about all we can affect is the soil around us.
It's also.
Can I say this? I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ola. I'm sorry.
No, carry on.
I would say this. The earth does know what we're planting. You can't plant all seeds in one soil or it does not grow. Each seed needs a different type of soil. And so if we cross, and even you cannot cross-pollinate a lot of the plants, right? They'll kill each other off. You can't plant two plants similar. So now the world has been muddled with all of this one seed of greed and etc. And the earth has been turned over so many times to plant just that. What does one do to get to the right soil and plant their seeds where they need to grow that will safely grow without being eaten or taken over and strangled by the constant one seed that has been planted? How do we get there? And does it change for each individual? Like we can all go through similar traumas, but because we all look at things differently, we're all going to need something different to heal. And when do we stop approaching things from our own logical point of view, but a point of view of love for all, and that logic can't heal anybody, and that the hate that we're still planting can't heal anyone either? When do you turn your soil? Sorry.
No, you're okay. I was just going to say one brief thing, and then I want Olo to go on this. But like, I think the first step in that process of shaping our surroundings is knowing we don't have to accept. That we say a lot of the times we have to come to accept things to grow, but I don't think maybe tolerate's the right word, Olo. We don't necessarily need to tolerate the injustices that we see around us, and if the goal just because it is what we're used to, living in a society of greed and self-importance and self-gratification doesn't necessarily mean that that's what we need to succumb to. I guess is what I would want to say.
Yeah, I think I like that you pointed out the idea of the effect on the earth itself. It's essentially when something has been cultivated so much, there's a terraforming that's happened, right? The soil and the climatic conditions have made it's terraformed the earth to make it so that it's conducive for itself, so that anything else you try to plant, it's hostile to that thing. So, and Jason also pointed out that, you know, it's at a point where you don't really have to plant evil anymore. It's like self-sustaining now. It will pollinate itself, it will spread its own seed, and so it will germinate and keep sustaining itself. And so one of the things is now we have to actively root it out. You know, we have to actively pick up the seeds and remove them and do a lot of cleaning out.
You have to burn the fields.
Not burn the fields. Ready? This totally, you know where I was going to go with this quote, Olo? Not burn the fields. It brings me back to that biblical quote where the weeds get blown in with the crop. And he says you don't have to, do you know that one?
I don't know. I don't know that one. I was going to. I think Angela and I had a similar discussion, and I was going to say we need to refer to like an Aggie, although I am an Aggie, but someone who actually has a PhD in agriculture and knows what the actual analogy would be.
Yeah, I was going to go with this story of the weeds. So if the weeds being the evil, right? Like the weeds being blown into the crop, the good, healthy crop that you want to produce, right? Well, now we have to till the whole field. Well, no, you don't have to till the field. You just have to discern by the fruit produced and pick. Because once they start to splanch, once they start to grow, you'll recognize the corn seed versus anything else, and you'll be able to walk through the rows, and you can slowly, because we can't, like you said, you know what? Do we burn the whole field?
Well, they do. In agriculture, they burn the entire field when it's diseased.
In this case, what we're saying is it's at a point where there's no corn that can. The entire thing is essentially growing and cultivating like toxic. It's a toxic harvest that if we allow it to continue to grow, it's actually dangerous, and it needs to be destroyed. Is basically where we're at. So we're not even.
In a field, I guess what I would say in that regard then is in a field where all you see is, and I forget the theologian or the philosopher that said this, but in a field where there's nothing but bad, good is easily recognized and valued. If all you see around you is bad, it's easy to recognize what good is, because it stands apart. It's foreign. It's unrecognizable to the landscape because it does not fit in, and as such, it's more easily recognized. Do you get where I was going with that?
By who?
I'll have to look it up and I can get it to you, but it basically speaks on when a community, when there's nothing but selfishness, and you recognize one person in the group that says, I caught more fish than me, here, I want you to have some so you don't have to work as hard. That person will stand out in the group. It's very easy to recognize that person, right? And that one person who starts to hand out fish in a village of fishermen who only care for self, they're going to be like, okay, I didn't have to fish as hard because he helped me today. They're going to look at him as different. It's easier to see the person offering in a world of takers. You see what I mean? I'll find the philosophical argument, and I think what he was referencing is that where one starts, hey, I had a bountiful day and I shared, so someone else didn't have to struggle. Maybe the next time that guy who he gave to had a bountiful day, he'll remember him. and he'll go, hey, did he have a good day fishing today? Let's make sure he's taken care of. And it's just this turning point. It's just a turning point, if you will.
No, I'd like to read it. I would so like to read that, and I would definitely write a response.
Because you can see the logic there, right? Like
I can see the logic, but I would argue against it, though. I would argue against it because because if we take
sounds too good to be true.
Well, yes, and it doesn't factor in human nature. It doesn't, because it takes humans as machines, and we're not.
But it goes to that. I think what it goes to then is it's back to that. The guy handing out fish is the same monk sitting on fire, not moving.
The guy handing out fish is the same monk that's.
Because when you're saying we're robots, right, you would say, well, we should all just be flailing in pain. But that one is like,
what I mean is no. The
but
guy
you get the kind of correlation I'm getting at. Like,
yes, I do.
It's breaking the robotic mold that we're fixed in.
It's not the guy. It's not the guy. It's the others. It's the state of the others. For them to be in that state, or the state that we are referring to, it's like a magnetic state. And what we're pointing out is the magnetic binding into this condition is so strong that it's not something that can be easily pulled out of, and that's the issue.
Oh, it's not easy. Yeah, it wouldn't be easy, right? Because we're in a world of people with their hands out. Very few people are giving.
Yeah, and that's it's a bit it's frustrating. It's very personal, and it's very I apologize. It's frustrating.
No, you're okay. I mean, it makes complete sense. It makes complete sense, and so that's kind of, I guess, that's where I'd like to see, our beingness, right? Because if all we can do is be, if we can start to be the fish givers in the land of fish takers.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think the exercise is correct. It is correct, in the sense of, be the change you want to see. Be the change you want to see.
Yeah. And as bleak as it is, right? As dark as it is out there, Olo, right? Light is easier recognized.
Yeah.
And I have to say, this has been a wonderful conversation, and I appreciate both of you being here for it. And we're coming up on the 1.5 hour mark, so I just want to take the time to have any closing comments from Olo. If you prefer to add anything here, as I told you via message, we'd love to have you back. I am going into silence after this, and so I'm Silent Bob, and that's Jason. So you'll be here with Leah and Jason going forward. If I am here for any guest appearances, it will just be silently until I'm done. But I definitely want to open the floor to allow you to close us out with any final thoughts.
Okay. Yes. Well, thank you for having me. This has been great. I like the thread of the conversation. I think I don't know that there's anything more that I'd like to add on the particular conversation. I think we touched on most of the things I wanted to say. We touched on, I think one of the things that would be a good segue to the next conversation would be, we touched on reincarnation. And so that would be something to start on with the next topic, because reincarnation does gel well with this idea that we're talking about in terms of the state of the world and the different contributions we may all have had to the state of the world and things like that, and how we can, we're be that as it may, we are all here today, and what part do we all play in the present state? Where do we go from here? We're all here now. Where do we go from here? And so thank you. This has been lovely. I enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you so much, Olo. I was gonna say, it's pleasure's ours. Pleasure's ours. It was wonderful.
Yes, likewise.
It definitely was. Well, I'm just going to call us over and call us out. So thank you all for joining Readdress Culture today with Jason and I and our guest Olo. And you can find us all on TikTok. We all have different handles. And if you want to name out your handle, you're able to right before we end off. But if anything else, I just really appreciate having such a spiritually intelligent conversation that was not emotionally driven and pointing out. No one was driving a nail into a cross. No one was trying to do anything other than just convert what we were trying to say and who we are. And it was lovely. Thank you both, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Well, Happy New Year in advance. Don't stay too silent too long.
Most definitely will do my best to come out when spirit tells me to, but I stay until I'm done.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Bless
All right.
New Year. Bye.
Yes.
Bye.